I have a door here with a lot of rot. I'm going to repair this rot with the epoxy resin. I've taken the door off the hinges and I'm going to clean out as much of this rot as I can with some chisels and screwdrivers and other little things. Here are some of the tools I'm going to use. This is a screwdriver with a bend in it. Just a regular straight screwdriver, hooked gouge chisel, a curved chisel, and a straight chisel. Okay. Go for the easy stuff first. Just pull out whatever you can. Basically going for the soft wood. I'm going to go get a paint scraper, that'll help. Flat one to get some of this easy to get stuff out. Once you see what you got to work with, you take the other one and gouge out the rotten wood. If you have an air compressor, it's a great way to clean out the wood chips. When I'm doing repairs on doors, I like to use the marine epoxies. This is two different brands. I'm going to be using this one because it's a fast set. This is a slow set. And for this type of work with small batches, I like the faster set. And when you're mixing epoxy, make sure you wear gloves and clothes you just don't care about. I like to put the epoxy in with one of these inexpensive brushes. Very easy to mix the epoxy. This will be used later when we mix the thicker. Thickened epoxy as a filler and a putty. So it's very easy to mix. You just use the pumps. And this pump is a little sticky, so I have to hold my finger on it on the upstroke. They get grumpy after a while. And one pump each. For the first mix, I'm going to use the straight epoxy, so it will get into the wood and keep the wood from, allow the wood to absorb the epoxy. Now the clock is here because this should be mixed for 2 full minutes. Now we're at 2 minutes. If you don't mix for the full 2 minutes, you can get an uneven set where some places are set and other places are still tacky. This ensures that all the resin is mixed properly. I'm back at the door now, and I've left it out in the sun a while to dry. There was some moisture in here that I wanted to allow to dry out before I started placing the epoxy. And I'm just working the epoxy into the rotten wood and allow it to absorb into those fibers to help seal all the rotten area and keep water penetration from occurring again. I'm going to mix that thickened epoxy. If you want to keep this brush nice, use some denatured alcohol. It's good for cleaning all your instruments, tools that you've used. Gets the epoxy off, so we're just going to keep that brush nice to use later. And I'm going to mix, for the first batch, I think 4 pumps would be a good starting place. Again, you don't want to mix too much at one time because it will bloom or set prematurely before you get it in. I work pretty fast, so I'm not overly concerned about it. start to mix. I've now mixed for 2 minutes. And we're going to start adding the wood powder. Mix it in small increments. Mix that in and add a little bit more. Being careful not to add too much too fast, because once you add too much, it's really hard to make it thinner. It's like cutting a board. You can't cut it longer. This is not quite there. It's still pretty drippy, so I want a little bit thicker. Put in a little less each time. See how it's mixing. Almost where I want it, so I'm just going to put it in tiny bits now. This isn't rocket science, it's art as much as anything. That's pretty doggone good. And just start taking these small mixes and work it into the holes. At this point, I want to let this set up a little bit because it's pulling every time I try to shape it, and the deeper portions want to pull with the top layer. So I'm going to let this set. We've got a lot of expansion there, so it doesn't really matter. We just need to deal with it. So just cut it smooth and go on from there. Brought this nice away. Okay, what I think happened is that was too thick a mass and it overheated and caused it to foam up. So don't do what I did, make smaller layers, and that shouldn't happen. I think this is the thickest layer I've ever tried to put into a door at once, so that would explain why it reacted the way it did. Set up pretty well here, and so now I'm going to put in a little bit of a skim coat to just fill in the last little bits of voids and smooth it out because it's still kind of rough. This is made with less of the resin, less of the wood powder. So it's going to be thinner. You can see it's spreading quite nicely now. After sanding and painting, this is where the rot was, and some over here. It's all very solid. Very nice repair.